Hello everyone, I'm Audra and this is Mikey, and we're here today to start a family vlog because we've been going through a lot of hard things in terms of infertility. So we wanted to share a little bit about our story and our journey, because what we found is that while our family members are so supportive, nobody can really understand what it's like to go through this. So we wanted to give everybody just a glimpse into our life to see what is it actually like for a couple who's going through infertility. So a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with what's called PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And basically, long story short, my ovaries never release eggs. And so that's been our main struggle. The good news is I do have millions of eggs. So we will be able to have a family, or at least we are hopeful for that. It's just going to be a little bit of a longer process for us. So we're going to walk you through it. We've gone through and what the hardest part has been. So Mikey, what's the hardest part of this journey been for you?
I think the hardest part for me is knowing I can't fix it when my wife's got some stuff going on, when she's emotional, and when something's wrong. As a husband, I want to fix it. I want to repair the problem. I want to make it better. And when you can't control these things, you can't do that. And I think that's really hard. Because I love to make people happy, especially my wife, and I love to fix everyone's problems. And sometimes you just can't fix things when, biology and drugs and all sorts of advanced stuff is in play. Sometimes you can't do anything but wait, and that's really tough.
And I think one of the hardest things for me is when you watch your family members play with other babies. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not trying to hurt you. But all you can do is look at that family member and think, I wish they were playing with my child. Mm-hmm. And then you wonder, will they ever be able to play with my child? And you go through that grieving process all the time. So when you're at a family event like a birthday party and it's supposed to be so exciting, it's heartbreaking. And you just have to put on a smile. And I think that's been one of the hardest parts for us, is having to pretend like everything is okay. And then when you go behind those doors and it's just real and it just hits you. So now that we've talked a little bit about what's been hard on this journey, let's talk about what we've gone through. So we started this journey pretty much right after we got married. We have been trying for a kid kind of off and on, and nothing was happening. So we finally went to my OB, who specializes in PCOS, and they put us on Clomid. Well, we ended up starting at the lowest dose and working our way all the way up to the very maximum dose. We went through 5 rounds total of Clomid with no success. So it was a bunch of roller coaster emotions, where it's like at the beginning you're like, there's a chance, or praying that it just takes these pills and we're going to move on, and trusting God and trying to have that faith like a mustard seed. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the month, nothing would have happened.
After testing for ovulation, and then when nothing happens, you have to test to make sure you're not pregnant before you can go back and start over, and all those negatives showing up on those little tests it's hard.
Absolutely. It's so hard. And I think one of the hardest parts too is we did get a false positive on ovulation 1 month. And so we had this real extreme hope like this was our month. Mm-hmm. And it just did not happen. So at that point, we were then referred to a fertility specialist, which we're so thankful to have a really good fertility doctor. The main problem that we're experiencing is with our schedule. We have to work Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and we have both really packed schedules. And the closest fertility doctor is about an hour and a half away in Charlottesville. So we're kind of struggling with that, but working through the process. Now, outside of the Clomid, when we got to the fertility doctor, they did, of course, a couple of ultrasounds, and we saw that we had eggs, and that was probably one of the happiest moments of both of our lives. because we knew that there's a chance. I had eggs. It wasn't a question of can we have kids. It was a question of when. So we went through 2 rounds of letrozole, which is a different type of fertility medication. A lot of times it's used to treat breast cancer, but it's not yet FDA approved for fertility treatment. But we did ovulate the very first time of taking letrozole. And we were both ecstatic. We thought this was it. We're going to go back. We're just going to take another round of letrozole. We just didn't get the timing right. But sadly, that just wasn't the case. We went back and there was absolutely no growth. No growth whatsoever. And that day our doctor wasn't there. We had another doctor who stepped in. So what that doctor decided to do was put us on one more round of letrozole to see if that would work. Or, sorry, not letrozole, Clomid, to kind of switch it back, kind of go back and forth. And the Clomid...
A higher dose than the OBs are able to do.
Yes. They also added prednisone to that. So we were taking letrozole and prednisone, or Clomid and prednisone at the same time to try and increase our chances. And sadly, we did not really experience any growth whatsoever. So the doctor said I was kind of frozen in time, as you will. And that's when we're now moving on to our next thing. Now, one thing I did forget to mention was that during the round that we did ovulate on, we were given a trigger shot. That trigger shot helps force ovulation, but unfortunately that cycle, it just did not work. So our next option was to take a break, which is really, it wasn't an option at this point because we've been waiting over 2 years, and we're just really ready to have our arms filled with babies. And I think the next step was hard because we weren't necessarily on the same page all the time. We were kind of upset. We were confused, like why would God allow all these other people to have babies, and why can't we? When we so desperately want that baby. It's wanted more than that baby will ever know. So with a lot of talking together and lots of prayer and leaning on the Lord, we decided to push through. So we will now be going on to try what are called gonadotropins. Basically, this is a shot of FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, and it's going to force the follicles to develop. The main issue with the shots is, one, they're very expensive. So for 5 days of shots, it cost about $400, and you could have to take up to, how many was it, like 30?
I think like 20 or 30 days worth.
Yeah. So it can be very expensive. So that's one of the major setbacks. Another setback is that you have to actually go and get an ultrasound every 5 days.
Or more frequent.
Or sometimes more frequently. So every 5 days you've got to go in and have an ultrasound. And all of this, the doctor's visits, the ultrasound, the shots. Unfortunately, we work for an employer that doesn't cover any fertility. So everything is out of our pocket. And we're really having to lean and trust on the Lord and just pray through this process. Thankfully, we have family members who are very helpful and supportive during this time. But with the fertility shots, the main thing that they're looking for during those ultrasounds is to see how many follicles have grown. Because during a typical cycle, a woman will have 9 to 10 follicles that grow, but 1 or 2 that matures. And for somebody who has PCOS like myself, who has true PCOS, you can have 100 plus follicles that fully mature with this. So you have to be very intentional and careful to make sure that obviously we're not having that many babies, because your body can't do that. So the doctor has to check you all the time.
Yeah, we'll do 5 days, see how many follicles grew to the right size. If not enough did, we'll do 3, 4, 5 days more. We'll go back again. If too many did on the first dose, we would just abstain that month, because we don't want to have 4 or 5 pregnancies start, because that is possible if there are that many follicles that do develop from the drug. More than likely, we'll probably need another box or so, another 5 days or so, but that's why we're going to have to go up multiple times as they increase the dosage or as they increase the days, to see exactly when that perfect window is of 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 follicles grow, but no more, no less. It's going to be kind of a guessing game until we find out the perfect number of days and perfect number of units to give for her body.
So it really is a process, and it tests everything. It tests your finances, it tests your marriage, it tests your family relationships, your personal relationships with friends, because you don't have the finances to go out and spend time with them, or to go out to different events or different trips or vacations.
Or the energy.
Or the energy, yeah. You're always exhausted. And it can make the process even that much harder. Spiritually, you're also severely challenged. You have a lot of why would God questions, and you have to then kind of take a look at who is God and who is He at His heart, and know that God is for families, that God doesn't prevent you from having children. That's not of His nature, that He loves children and that He wants to bless you with those children. And that's something that we're currently working through even. So I definitely recommend anyone who's going through a situation like this. Counseling can be a really great resource. It's something that I myself have taken, and I've done that through my local church, and I found that to be a really great way to work through some of those emotions, because sometimes I have to just look at Mikey and I say, you're not the enemy. And he can attest to that. I've had to say, you're not the enemy. And he has to tell me, I'm not the enemy, because your hormones go crazy during all of these things. But just knowing that you're on the same team, that God is good, and that you have a family supporting you is one of the most important things that I can recommend. So I brought this to share with everybody. Here is just a small sample of what we've gone through so far. So this is a pack of Clomid, and you'll see several of these prescription bottles that we've taken that are now empty. Some of these are for prednisone, letrozole, Clomid. So it's not that we're not trying. What people don't understand is that we want that baby even more than you want us to have that baby. And it's just a process. So now our next step is going to be these shots. These are the expensive shots that we're unfortunately having to go through. We will be taking our first one tonight, and we'll also be vlogging that so you can walk through our journey with us, just to see the emotions. Because while we look pretty good right now, at least in my opinion, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're just a hot mess. Our hair is not brushed, and makeup's running down my face. And it's just part of the emotions that you go through together as a couple. So I'll just show you what's in here as we open this up. So the way that this is going to work tonight, and we'll explain this again later, is you have this little vial of medication. It's hard to believe that this tiny little thing is $400. But what you do is you take this little shot of liquid, and you take off the cap, and you inject this liquid into this bottle, and this will become the medication that you use. Then you'll take one of these shots out of this container. And so here's what those shots look like. And you'll take the shot, you'll pull it back to the medicine level that you're trying to inject, and then you'll push the air into the container, and then after you push that air into the container, you'll pull out the right amount of medicine. Then Mikey will be the one who's administering the shot, and of course we'll have to make sure that the needle goes all the way in so that the medicine can properly be distributed. So we're praying that the shots will work the first time around, and we're so glad that you're a part of our journey. And we hope that this vlog experience will show you exactly what it's like for couples who are going through such a difficult time. Thank you.